Dust is still settling from the midterm election held now almost 2 weeks ago. Iowa's results are basically a mirror image from Illinois. Illinois will have the Democrats firmly in charge of the governor's mansion, the state house, and the state senate. Well, that hasn't been the case there for 4 years. Well, in Iowa, it's the Republicans who are steering the ship. It's been that way for 2 years now. Republicans went into the election with a 59-41 stronghold in the House. Democrats gained some ground there, not enough to retake control. It's now a 54-46 majority for the Republicans in the State House. Republicans added to their majority in the Senate after November 6th. They went into the election with a 29-20 edge with one independent. That's going to basically be 32-18 come January. It's important to note that there will be a record 45 women serving in Des Moines during the next legislative session. That's up from the current record of 35. That's actually happened 4 times in state history. There will be 34 women alone in the House and another 11 in the Senate. Well, that sets the stage for some different points of view in Des Moines. Republicans utilized their majority to their advantage the last couple of years by restructuring the state income tax system, passing tougher abortion restrictions, and advancing gun rights. There could be more of that on the way. 2 state representatives who will be part of that debate on different sides of the political aisle join us for a conversation this morning. Democrat Monica Kurth and Republican Gary Moore. Thanks so much for being here. Congratulations on winning another term in office to both of you.
Thank you.
Different faces don't necessarily mean different outcomes, especially with a specific agenda from Republicans. The party took the ball and ran with it the last 2 years. I guess what changes, if any, do you expect to see from the recent dynamic in Des Moines? Representative Kurth?
Well, we're closer. The Democrats are closer, and I'm hoping that there'll be more of a trend to work across the aisle. We really felt shut out of budget discussions and other discussions last year. I wish we were even closer, though. I think that's the big change that we're looking at. We're also looking at a change in our leadership in the Democratic caucus. That's going to be determined tomorrow.
Do you expect a change in the Democratic caucus based on what's coming tomorrow?
Our leader is stepping down, and so we'll be looking at an election for a new leadership.
How much do you think that can change how Democrats have an influence on the process?
Well, so far I've talked to people, and it seems like the biggest concern is really taking a look at 2 years from now and really fighting to get more Democrats in the House. We made some progress this year. We hope to regain the majority in 2 years.
Of course, it's all about the power structure. We understand that. What changes do you expect, if any, Representative Moore, from the recent dynamic we've seen?
I think a lot of what we did last session will continue this year, Jim. Things like we will not spend more than we take in. That won't change. Education is going to be a key. The Medicaid issue is going to be a key. Funding the state government is going to be a key. So we're going to be doing many of the same things, but we're going to continue to take a very conservative approach. Workforce, one of the biggest things we need to do is help our companies identify workers and train workers to keep this ball rolling of job creation and wealth creation. And so we'll continue with those major issues in the state.
I want to touch a little bit about that and education a little bit later in our discussion, because there's been no real, I want to more talk on the broad brush strokes to begin with. There's been no real, I guess, bipartisan conversations once Republicans took control. At least that's a perception from the Democrats, and as we see as observers, and certainly it doesn't have to be based on the way that the government works. However, voters seem to suggest they want to see more of it. That's what we saw, a little bit of a trend, certainly in the House. I guess what can each of you do to promote that, and which issues do you think that is more likely to happen? Representative Moore?
Sure. I think it will happen. As Representative Kurth mentioned, the Republicans went from having 54 members, 59 members to 54. And so as the numbers get closer, there will be more conversations across the aisle.
You think that does force Democrats to have a more of a seat at the table?
Sure, I think it does. I think it's a good thing. It's always good. Monica and I have been friends for years. We don't have a problem sitting down talking on particular
Thankfully, because
issues.
we've got you next to each other right now.
That's right. And I think there'll be more of that, absolutely. When the numbers are closer, the committees will be closer, there'll be more discussions of different points of view on various issues, and I think it will affect the outcome of legislation.
Do either of you think there are more issues that are more likely to be bipartisan discussions on?
I certainly hope so.
Are there any specific areas you think that they're more likely to happen?
Well, I think, all the areas, we come at it from different angles. But education, whether it's K through 12 or colleges and universities, funding for Medicaid, funding for workforce training, they're all issues important to all of us. We have different angles that we look at it, but we need to have those discussions and come to agreement between both parties.
And you seem to be in agreement on education. You think there's room for a real talk? And
I certainly hope so, because I think when we're looking at education, we're looking at some dropping numbers that nobody's happy with.
we're going to get to some of those specifics a
Okay.
little later, but I just want, but you do think there's room to talk on that at
Yes.
least. Des Moines, I touched on it earlier, we'll see almost a 30% increase in women in the legislature for the next session. That is a big deal. I don't think we can underestimate that. How do you think that influence will be utilized, or in terms of at least what is able to be accomplished? Representative Kurth?
Well, you know, I think there's a tendency for women to be a little bit more collaborative than men, and I think there's certainly some possibility that we can pull together a little bit more with discussions. I'm also concerned about women's issues. I think that I don't want to get too specific, but some of the legislation passed last year was harmful to women in terms of their health services. And I think that that's an issue that women can get together on. I certainly hope so.
How do you see the influence of women in the legislature?
Every 2 years, Jim, the legislature changes.
Sure.
It's been that way for 100+ years. It will continue to change.
This is
I
a
think
record
it's-
level, though, for women now.
Absolutely, and I think it's positive that more women are going to serve in the Iowa legislature. So I think it's a good thing, but it's something that happens every 2 years, and we'll just have to see how that plays out.
No real sense of what's going to happen based on that differing points of views necessarily.
No, I don't really know what will happen. There'll be different voices, there'll be different priorities, but that's what a legislature does. That's the purpose of them.
We have more to talk about with Iowa State Representatives Gary Moore and Monica Kurth. What's on the horizon for the state's finances, how lawmakers could tackle different aspects of your taxes. For the record.